This is Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars with Stephen Fennick and Trevor Long. Thanks to NRMA Insurance and Uniden.
And it's great to have their company. This is Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars, proudly brought to you by the NRMA Insurance, helping over 3 million people across Australia protect the things they care about. And Uniden Smart Dash Cams awarded Best Dash Cam by CanStar Blue across a huge range of categories, 5 stars in all of them. We are here to help you understand electric cars, to think about what you might want to consider before you buy an electric car, and maybe even help us understand what you think of your electric car. Stephen, good to have your company, mate.
G'day, Trev. Good that we're out with this podcast and people are listening. It is really good to have hear the feedback from our listeners too. That they yet another podcast from the Two Blokes, and they're liking what we're doing.
We appreciate the feedback and the ratings and reviews. If you leave comments, we read them all, and if you leave ratings and reviews on iTunes, greatly appreciated. Now, it's actually been a pretty big week for electric cars because of the federal government's new vehicle efficiency standards.
Yeah.
Very long and drawn-out term, which kind of is their way of saying we don't want to call it any form of tax. We don't want to imply that we're taxing petrol cars, but it does set a standard for the way Australian car industry as a whole presents cars to Australians. That's the broad principle of this thing.
It's the government's way of saying, you know what, car companies, we want you to produce vehicles that use less fuel. And make them more efficient.
Yes.
Make them, and whether that's a fuel car, whether that's them developing more EVs, how they take that requirement.
That's right.
Is what we're going to discuss.
So I think the thing that I reckon people need to understand here is, because obviously there's a bit of hysteria about this if you go to one entire side of politics, let alone one entire side of the EV opinion world, because there are plenty of people with opinions on EVs, let's be clear. This is not about requiring you to buy any sort of car.
No.
This is about requiring car companies to sell a fleet of cars across the year that meet a certain threshold of emissions.
Yeah.
So it's essentially, grams per kilometre of carbon emissions, if you want to look at it that way, right? That's the concept, is to say we're going to go, okay, Kia, Hyundai, Toyota, Ford, all the car companies. We're going to measure the emissions, the average CO2 emissions per kilometre of the total volume of vehicles you sell.
Yeah.
So if Toyota sells 250,000 cars or 1 million cars, whatever it is in the year, they're going to look at every single one of those cars. They're going to use the sticker that appears on the windscreen, and they're going to go, this is the emissions of it. Yep. And they're going to work out the average kilometres that are driven, and they're going to say these vehicles are over the criteria. They're gas guzzlers, and these vehicles are more efficient than the criteria. Yeah. And then what happens is, if you are a car company and you are over, then you either need, and this is where it gets a little bit carbon taxy, you either have to go to a company, I assume like BYD and Tesla, who only make electric cars, and say to them, hey, can we buy some of your credits because you were way below the threshold?
Yeah.
So
it does sound carbon taxi, doesn't it?
Car companies can trade amongst themselves their emissions overall.
Okay. But so let's use a couple of examples then.
Yep.
So let's say look at we'll talk about Ford.
Yeah.
Right. Ford are just starting to now bring in their EV lineup.
That's right.
So across the board, their efficiency is going to improve.
That's right.
But similar.
How many are they selling?
Well, at the moment, not many.
See, it's not about they've got 10 cars. Let's just say they've got 10 models, the Puma, the Ranger. That's not about the number of cars. It's about how many they sell. And they sell a lot of Ford Rangers.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, true.
Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
And they're gas guzzlers in old school speak.
Yeah.
So they've got to sell. It's not the same number of electric vehicles, but they've got to sell a decent amount to begin to claw that back. But what you then need to appreciate is in the middle of the Ford range, you've got some really efficient engines. Even the Ford Mustang. Remember the Ford Mustangs years ago that we drove? Yep. One was a V8, one was an EcoBoost.
Yep.
That's a very efficient car.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know the numbers. I haven't seen the true detail, but it may be that the EcoBoost version of the Mustang essentially offsets the V8 version and means that it's neutral in Ford's overall emissions target.
So the positive outcome for customers, though, is that a lot of manufacturers then were more likely to see if Australia's in this mindset, then wouldn't it be that car manufacturers want to send us more cars that are more fuel efficient as well as the EVs? Is that the benefit we're going to see?
That is exactly the purpose of this legislation. The purpose of this legislation is not to force us to buy anything. It's to force the car companies to bring in better cars and not dump. It's literally termed dumping the gas guzzlers onto Australia because we didn't have these laws.
Yes.
United States, Europe, all these
and
places
they've had it for a while, those other countries,
exactly.
haven't they? Yeah.
And so you get cars.
So you're saying Australia was like a bit of a dumping ground for others. So now those days are over.
So the CEO of Kia has got to ring the boss in Korea and say, listen, I know you've been sending us a bunch of awesome little Sorrentos and stuff, but we now need more hybrids. And we need more electrics.
More EVs.
We need more, because they make them.
Yeah.
All these
of course they do. Yeah.
Volkswagen, great example.
Yeah.
They sell a lot of cars. And they've only just started introducing electric vehicles.
Yep.
They've probably got some really efficient vehicles in overall in the fleet. But they've got to ring the boss in Europe and say, listen, we're going to need a better allocation and probably a better deal on some of these electric vehicles so that we can churn through them a bit and hopefully bring that overall target to where it's meant to be.
So I'm reading into this too that this would encourage those companies to bring more of their electric vehicles into Australia.
Definitely.
To improve. Well, not only it's a two sort of pronged approach, right? If there's more choices for customers, there's then more chances they're going to trend towards those cars, and at the same time, it's dragging down their average to meet these new standards.
Yes.
So it is kind of pushing the chips in EV's direction, don't you think, a little bit?
I think so. And here's the thing. A lot of the reporting this week was like, oh, it's going to drive prices up. I actually think potentially quite the opposite.
It's going to create competition.
So forget EVs for a minute and just think hybrids.
Yep.
Now, Toyota, I think, probably are on average pretty good in this space because they sell so many hybrid cars.
Yep.
Klugers, RAV4s, Corollas, everything, right? Whereas they're obviously selling a lot of Hiluxes as their big seller. Yep. So the question is, are they already in a good space or not? But that concept will come to the Kias and the Mazdas of the world. You know, you drove the Mazda plug-in hybrid last week. That car would have a better efficiency score than the petrol equivalent.
Yeah, the CX-60.
And so if they bring them in and they price them too high, they won't sell them because
and it goes on sales, doesn't it? So if it just sits in a warehouse,
it's of no use.
It does no good to them. So they've got to be attractive to customers, to drivers. To I understand.
The dealers will essentially, I think, be incentivized by the head office to push people into these cars. Now, it's not going to be the full electric cars in the broad sense. Like you think about Kia, right? The EV9 is a $100,000 car. It's going to be very hard to upsell someone who's thinking about buying the 7-seat Sorrento for $60,000 or $70,000 to suddenly push them into the $100,000 mark. But if there's a Sorrento hybrid, now I was reading the other day, I believe that the new Carnival is going to come out in a hybrid. Oh. Well, so if you're the salesman, you'll be like, oh, this is more efficient for you. You'll save money. So it will cost the average buyer more. Because a hybrid might cost more up front.
Yep.
But they could potentially be sold on the efficiency over time.
Well, they're saying that Australians could save up to $1,000 per vehicle per year. And that's on fuel, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's on fuel.
Per year.
I hate those numbers.
Yeah.
Because that requires that you buy a new car.
Yeah.
But there's no savings for the average Australian just because of these legislations.
Short-term pain, long-term gain, I guess, is how they're interpreting this.
And that's fine for someone that's like I was in the market for a new car.
Yep.
It had to be a family car.
Yeah.
I was able to make the EV9 fit the budget. So that's fine for me to take that upfront decision and go, I actually did the numbers on exactly how much we've spent on petrol in the Carnival, in the family car over 4 years. And you go, okay, well, that's a saving over 4 years. So I can absorb that.
Okay.
But it's not as easy to introduce these more efficient cars that might be slightly more expensive or dramatically more expensive to the average Joe. They're not going to see these cost savings. It's really fascinating to me what the dealerships / brands do to drive the sales of these cars because they're forced to. They have to, or they don't meet their targets.
If it means, though, we're getting more fuel efficient cars, and let's face it, more EVs.
Yes.
A big car companies will tend to think, okay, Australia's now, the market is sort of becoming more suitable for an EV. So that means more choices for drivers, for customers, more being brought into the country. So the market size of 5 or 6 years ago, you could count on one hand the amount of EVs you can buy.
That's right.
Today, you've got there's a multitude of choices now, and this, I think, is going to help push that even forward.
And that's the
further.
argument. The argument is this legislation is exactly the legislation that's driven EV and hybrid technology in so many other countries. We are literally behind the times.
Yeah.
And let's be clear here, and one of the reasons we started this show is because we're not trying to come at this from the, banging on your door, you've got to get an EV perspective. We come at this from the perspective of, you might be like me. I've been thinking about buying an EV for 10 years.
Yeah.
It took me 10 years. So it might be 5 years for you, but it might be not your next car, it might be the one after.
Yeah.
But it certainly might be your next car, and you may spend a year thinking about that. And I think that's what our role here is to help people over the journey of buying that car or their next car to understand how it sits.
Knowledge is power, I always say, and learning and knowing all that. As you do, you and I did our homework before we jumped into our first EVs. I think that I think in people's minds now, I think EVs are now becoming a greater possibility in their choices. I think 12 months ago, as recently as 12 months ago, 18 months ago, an EV for a lot of people was off the table because they thought, no, I don't. They either didn't know enough, there wasn't enough models in the country, there wasn't the choice in terms of their price range wasn't that flash either. Now we're seeing with these announcements as well, the choices I think are what you're going to see. There's the word. The choice that you're going to have now is going to be greater than ever before. Yeah,
and that's a good thing. And that's what we're here for each and every week. Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars. Later this show, we're going to talk about how much you actually do need to charge your car. We're going to talk about why we think electric vehicles are more expensive than their traditional petrol rivals. And we're also going to unpack some of the electric vehicle sales numbers from January 2024. All right, Stephen, I think it's a really interesting question that people have about charging. We've talked a bit about charging in recent episodes, but the how much do I need to charge is actually important because it's that petrol versus my new mindset thing. Yes. When you fill up with petrol, you're either doing one of two things. You're going, fill her up or put $20 worth in. Yeah. That's the old, don't you reckon?
True, yeah.
So what's the new mentality people bring to EVs?
I think the new mentality is similar to in some cases similar to petrol, where you're just topping it up. Mm-hmm. The top up, I think, is probably your best bet for an EV because you're not going to drive to Sydney to Brisbane every week. No. You're not going to drive 4.5 hours every day. No. So I think just covering what you use is and it's a habit you fall into. Like I know with me, I would drive, I might use, 10, 12% battery a day. Mm. And so I found myself every couple of days putting 20% on. Right. And never filling it up to 100% or even the recommended, on my Tesla, they recommended your daily driving limit, keep it at 90% just for the battery health. Yes. We'll explain later on a later show why that's important. But the whole how much do I need, I think if you know, like I knew I was coming to see you today, it's a fair
put
drive.
It to 100.
It's a fair drive. So I thought I need to get up because I know, and this comes with experience too, I know how much of a percent, how many percent it takes to get from my place to yours.
What's my impact?
It's about 10% of the battery.
There and back or just one way?
One way.
Oh, okay.
It's a long way, mate. One way is 10%. And so I knew that I needed at least 20% on the battery to get there and back. And I think as people drive their EVs more often, they know, okay, well, I'm only going to go to work and back. Yep. I know how much I need.
But I think it's very rare, to have your car sitting. Like you leave your petrol car on a quarter of a tank for days if you're not driving a lot because you know that you can drive so many kilometres on a quarter tank. And an EV, you rarely do that because it's so you don't have to go out of your way, as we
Yeah.
talked about last week. You don't have to go out of your way to charge because it's in your driveway or your
Yeah.
garage, right?
Yep.
So it's actually very rare to see your car on way less than 50% most of the time because you're topping up. I was thinking about the challenge that we're going to have in future months of having 2 EVs in one
Yeah.
driveway with one charger. I'm not putting in a second charger.
Nah.
That's silly because
Exactly
we don't
right.
need to charge every day.
I thought the same thing. The only thing I did with my charger is I got the longest possible
Correct.
cord,
Yep.
okay, so I could, if both of our cars in the driveway, it can easily
7
reach
metres?
both. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can easily reach Joe's car, my car. She hasn't got an EV yet, but she will.
Yes.
So no, not 2 chargers, just a long cable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny though, and this is off topic, but when you would notice this now with the number of different cars we're driving,
Yeah.
not every car has the charging position in the same spot.
No.
So I pulled into the driveway the other day in the MG and went, I'll quickly top it up. And I went, it's on the other side.
Back left,
and,
not back
and
right.
unfortunately, that's not where I've configured that parking spot to be. So I need to
Yeah.
back into that one.
So where's your Cupra? What's that one? Where's that?
It's a great question.
You can't remember?
Back right.
Back right, on the driver's side.
Yes.
Mine's on the driver's side
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
My Tesla was on the passenger side.
But some cars
Back
are at the
passenger
front.
side.
Yeah.
Some are in the in the front.
Some are in the front, literal, but
Yeah.
others are just in front of
Yeah.
between the wheel and the driver's door. So
Yeah.
it's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But the
And
thing,
just a little bit of trivia too.
Yeah.
Like in your petrol car,
yeah,
there's a little
There's an
arrow.
arrow.
You know what? What's the saying? I was today
Years old.
when I realised that little arrow meant what side the car
points to the
of
side.
thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's,
when did you realise this?
No, years ago. But
Oh,
I remember
okay,
at
just
the
checking.
time when I realised when I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
So the answer to the question, how much do I need to charge, is really quite simple.
Yeah,
How much are you driving?
exactly.
Because
right. Yeah.
it's totally fine to have your EV sitting in the driveway night after night after night, going from 80 to 70 to 60 to 50 to 40 and never charging it, as long as you know that on Thursday night I'm going to charge it for 7 hours and it's going to be 80% or 90% again.
You might have a big weekend coming up. You know, you got to drive the kids around. You got parties, and you're going out for dinner and everything.
Yeah.
You might know. Okay, well, I tend to charge on a late in the week because I know I've got to do a lot of driving on the weekend.
Yes.
So I think it's a case by case basis where if you know you got a big weekend plan,
Yep.
you might have a road trip. You might be going away for the weekend. You know what you need.
I wonder if it sounds like we're making it sound complicated to say things like, planning it around what you do, but also I was going to say plan it around what your home is doing. If you're using solar through your charger, then you might only charge for 2 hours in the afternoon when you get home from work, and not other than that, because that's when you want to take advantage of the free power.
The free power during the day, of course.
And it sounds a little bit like we're overcomplicating, but think about it this way. It's the same as going, petrol prices, they go up on a weekend, so I'm going to fill up on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's the same. I'm going to check the apps to find out what the price is. It's not overly overbearing to have to think about it that way.
And also think too, for the customer, for the driver who's gone to the trouble of putting a charger in their driveway. And look, I recommend that everyone who
does
buys a car have a charger at home.
Yep.
I say to people, they say, aren't you worried about not having enough charge? I say, look, do you have a petrol Bowser in your driveway? And they go, no. I said, well, I do. I've got a charger in my driveway, so I'm good.
Yeah.
And look, you mentioned there are people who, with driving petrol cars, they think, okay, I need to top up a little bit because I've got a bit of a drive.
Yeah.
That's all part of their mental arithmetic anyway. With the car you own, the longer you drive it, the better you know it.
Yeah.
And the more the better you
You're
can
right,
make
though.
that call.
I think the best thing I've taken out of this conversation is what you said about you do learn. You learn very
totally,
quickly.
yeah.
I know my trip to North Sydney that I do a couple of times a week. I know broadly that's a 10% round trip.
See, it
I can
is
do
a
that
long way, mate.
I can do
See,
that.
it
No,
is
but
a
I
long
can
way.
do it in a 10% round trip, buddy.
Ah,
you know,
right.
you got to do 20% the whole way.
Maybe I'll go faster.
You
than
learn
I don't
these
know.
things. So
Is it uphill or something? What is it?
Well, you should check on the way back. It might be
I'll
different.
check the elevation.
Yes,
Is that
check
right?
the
That's
elevation.
getting really technical
Yes,
now.
you
Okay.
don't have to. Two blokes talking electric cars. So we talked about the efficiency standards coming and how it may or may not affect pricing.
Yeah.
What, in your view, is the reason EV cars are more expensive than petrol cars?
I think because it is for the established car companies, right? Forget
Yep.
Tesla, BYD, right? For a Mercedes-Benz, a BMW, a Volkswagen, Ford, these are car companies that have been around for 100 years that are now coming into EVs. So they're almost like starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
The basic mechanics are there. There's 4 wheels, a wheel, but it's them kind of reinventing their own technology.
Business.
So it's a whole new manufacturing line. It's a whole new design. It's a whole new approach.
Yep.
And that comes at a cost.
It's
not
R&D, don't you reckon?
It's research and development.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are, but the question is in 10 or 15 years, I've always said for several years, and I'm talking two federal elections ago, I think it was when Bill Shorten was going on about potentially getting to
charge up your car in 10 minutes.
No, but he was talking about the target of 50% of vehicles by 2030 or something like that.
They were very ambitious, weren't they?
I've always said the guide for me is if you look at a vehicle, especially one that is available as petrol and electric, and it was at the time the MG ZS was a great example.
Yes.
You could buy a petrol one and the electric one, which is the exact same vehicle but with just an electric motor and a battery underneath it, was $15,000 more.
Yeah.
That is this. We should find a name for it. It's the EV gap.
Yeah.
Right. That's that EV gap.
Yeah.
We do need to see that come down over time because R&D is great, but it should offset it. It should pay off itself over time.
Yeah, but I think that's a good example, the MG, and you're right, it was about 17K difference. And basically it was just the exact design of the car, wasn't it?
Yes.
And they even kept in the what do you call that? The
transmission
drivetrain,
tunnel.
the transmission tunnel. They even kept that in
That's
the
right.
EV.
That's
so
right.
there was no cost to alter the actual design of the car.
None.
It's just the power delivery is totally different way. And even that came at a cost.
But what I'm saying is in just 5 years, that number hasn't changed. So we haven't seen a dramatic change in that gap. And so the problem is, and I'm partly going against what I said earlier about cost savings, but for someone who is either forced to buy a new car because their other one broke or whatever it is, when you go to a dealership and you go, because I can buy a Hyundai i30 hatchback for $30,000 or $25,000, or I can buy a BYD for $48,000, or maybe their smaller one for $38,000, which is a little bit smaller than the Hyundai. So I'm still paying a premium. There is a premium, and the argument normally is that, and that's why Tesla puts it on their website, and a lot of companies do, they say cost savings.
Yeah, as in fuel cost savings.
Fuel costs. You're not going to pay this much in fuel at all over the next 4 or 5 years, and that's awesome, but you still got to pay for the car up front.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. But I think too, you got to remember that you'll notice even with Tesla have only ever made EVs. BYD only ever made EVs.
Yeah.
Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, all these companies, their EV ranges at the start, some of them I'm not sure had an EV version.
Yeah.
But you're finding now that their new EVs are designed as EVs.
That's right.
They're not coming from a petrol equivalent. And I reckon that is another reason why there's a bit of a gap, because the research, the development, the new tooling that was needed to be done to create this brand new vehicle came at a cost. Now, until those costs are bedded in and they can make it cheaper and get production efficiencies over time, and we're going to be seeing that, I think, for a little while.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's really important that people know what they're being pushed towards. If you're buying an EV because you're desperate and really want one and love it, then you probably won't be looking at that gap. And you'll essentially justify the gap with the cost savings.
Yeah.
But if you're buying a new car because it's time for a new car, that's where the challenge is. I think it's a hard gap to justify without really being able to factor in the cost savings over time.
And I think we discussed this in a previous show too, the cost difference for you to buy an EV over a petrol car. The petrol savings over, say, a 3 or 4 year lease or 5 year lease of the car, it probably won't be as much as the extra you paid for the EV in the first place.
That's right.
We've had this discussion before. So, but the good thing is, though, we're seeing, and this we've talked. We've got our tech podcast. We talk about all these new products when they're brand new technology. They're expensive.
Yeah.
Right. The Vision Pro, Apple's new product, it's going to cost us $6,000 in Australia. In 5 years, that's not going to be $6,000. So new technology costs more upfront, but as those production efficiencies, as the technology filters down to the lower levels, that's where you're going to see the savings. So this conversation in 5 years' time is going to be a lot different to today. We're going to see all these efficiencies and the costs are going to come down. It's going to get more competitive too. They're going to compete to get your business, to get you into their EV.
Well, I hope so anyway.
Well,
For the buyer's sake. That's what you want.
Absolutely.
All right, two blokes talking electric cars. So before we wrap up, I wanted to look at the new car sales numbers for January 2024.
All right.
And they're a bit fascinating, actually, because Tesla didn't top of the pops when it came to EVs.
Can I guess who did?
Yep, go.
BYD.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
It's because the release of their new models?
Well,
it's because Tesla was phasing out they had a new model coming in?
I've done some additional investigation.
Okay.
And it turns out that there was a batch of Model Ys sent back to China. Wait for it. This is according to drive.com.au.
Okay.
After stink bugs were discovered on board.
Stink bugs.
Stink bugs.
What's a stink bug?
I want to know at what point of the
we've got a
delivery
stink bug.
process was it one of the ship's crew went, whoa, what's going on here? Or was it at the port? But anyway,
Hang on. Is this a bug, an actual bug, or is it
stink bug.
What is it?
It's a bug.
So it's an insect that stinks. Is that what we're talking
Mate,
about?
this is not two blokes talking bugs. All right.
Okay.
Anyway,
But that was the official explanation. Stink
So
bug.
Tesla had 1,107 deliveries in January.
Okay.
And so that was broken up to the Model 3 was 723 and the Model Y was 384.
Is this the new Model Y? Is this the latest shape
Model
now?
Y?
Sorry, the Model 3?
Model 3. Well, you
Yeah.
don't know for sure, but you would assume 99% of those Model 3s were the Highland refresh.
Right.
For sure.
Okay.
BYD sold 1,310. The Atto 3, 465. Now, that's 465. They've been around for a year now, so they're still pumping them out pretty
Still
good.
solid, yeah.
The Dolphin, 256.
Wow.
That's the smaller one. And the Seal, 589. So that's, getting that early growth
Yeah.
because it's a new
How many?
thing.
589.
589.
Wow, that's pretty healthy.
Yeah.
Wow. Our lips are sealed.
Now, the true numbers from all the other brands are actually hard to find unless you specifically search for a model. So, for example, Stephen.
EQE 350.
Yeah, I knew you. No, you certainly don't know the
Sold
350, but the EQE, they sold 7.
Okay. 7.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's down on 14
Is
last
that all
January.
EQE models? Or?
All EQEs. EQE SUV,
Yeah.
which is new, 56.
Yeah. I knew that would be the case. They love
EQA,
we love SUVs.
62.
Okay.
EQB, 24. EQC, 20.
I don't mind the EQE low model numbers because it means there's not many people have my car.
You know what? I was just going to
Cupra,
say.
how many Cupras did they
Cupra
sell?
born, 49. I'm happy with
Not
that.
bad, not
that's
bad.
That's a fine number for
And
me.
this is Australia-wide?
This
or?
is all Australian sales.
Wow. So they only sold 7 EQEs.
Kia sold 47 EV9s.
47.
That's a big car.
And it's not cheap either.
Nope.
Doing very well, Trev.
Stop it.
Doing
So,
all right. Wow.
um,
Who else figured in the
well, I'm just thinking
Kia?
of cars. I'm
Yeah.
searching for the MG4, 537. It's a good number. That's
Solid.
better than the Atto 3 and the Dolphin. So
Yeah.
you could say that because I wouldn't compete the MG4 with the BYD Seal because the Seal is more of a sedan, larger sedan.
Yes.
But the MG4 outsold BYD's.
I think
individual models.
MG has a bit of it's got a bit of brand recognition. It's been
Right.
it's a brand that's has made petrol cars as well as EVs.
Yeah.
Does that count? You reckon for customers sort of thinking like BYD? They've only ever made EVs. They've only been around a few years. Do customers
MG's
think about this?
benefit in Australia
Yeah.
is that, and I'm going to make a broad assertion here, the majority of buyers, maybe not the majority, a large number of buyers don't realise they're a Chinese car.
Right.
They think they're just British MGs.
And they also know that they're the South Sydney major sponsor. That's what helps, I reckon, gets
That's
the
what's
people in the
driving
cars.
sales.
Yeah, for sure.
So overall numbers, passenger cars,
Yep.
there were 2,669 passenger electric vehicles sold.
Right.
Just for comparison, there were 3,000 hybrid. Now, that's fascinating to me because that's 400
Plug-in
short.
hybrid. Yeah.
Or just hybrid.
Okay.
Doesn't
right.
matter whether it's plug-in or battery hybrid, as
okay.
in like a
Do
Toyota Corolla.
they still have to have a little EV triangle?
Yep, they do. So what's fascinating is if the Model Y wouldn't have made a difference, but if they sold more Model 3s, and remember Tesla's shipments come like every 2 months or something, so they might sell 3,000 next month.
Yes, right.
But that would mean that more electric cars get sold than hybrids. I think that is a trend to watch.
Wow.
Okay, electric outselling hybrid. Just for perspective, 2,669 passenger cars. 9,982 petrol passenger cars.
Yeah, we're still single-digit percentage, aren't we? Isn't EV still single-digit percentage of cars sold in Australia?
In the SUV space, 2,208 SUVs were sold that were electric. 6,700 were hybrid.
Oh.
So a long way to go there.
Yes.
And that again, I'm saying a large part of that is Toyota, probably Mitsubishi. They do a plug-in hybrid as well.
Yep.
But petrol cars, 30,000 SUVs.
That's a lot. Just
So
in the
we're
month
a
of
long way
January.
off, just in the month of January.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, we always knew a long way to go.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen overnight. It's
The big challenge for everyone is the light commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
18,000 were diesel, 2,000 were petrol, and only 16 were electric.
How many conversations have you had about this from people who live in rural areas, country areas, and thinking, we'll never.
Well, that's where BYD is going to be fascinating because they're going to bring a hybrid ute,
right.
petrol with a hybrid battery later this year, apparently.
Yep.
And that could disrupt.
In the States, they call a ute a pickup truck, eh? They call
That's
it a
right,
pickup
yep.
truck. Yeah. And again, top category in America too, isn't it?
Yeah.
The pickup truck. Yeah. We call it the ute because it's a utility vehicle.
Yeah, we are getting pretty close to calling them pickups now, but
Pickups.
dual cabs is what I'd prefer to refer
Dual
them
cab,
because
okay,
most of them are
yeah.
dual cab utes.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But yeah. Anyway, that's the
Wow.
state of the market in Australia with
State
new
of the
car
union.
sales. It will be interesting to see how that electric number fluctuates across the year, and that's something we'll definitely check in on regularly. I'll try and get a little bit more deep into the numbers with a bit of preparation as we go forward to try and give percentages and
That'd be
stuff
nice
like that
of
as
you,
well. Preparation's everything. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail.
That's our motto around here.
How's this going then?
I think so far so good.
Okay, so
We're
far,
managing.
Well, thank you very much to NRMA Insurance and to Uniden Smart Dash Cams for presenting two Blokes Talking Electric Cars to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Leave your comments wherever you can or get in touch with us via Stephen's website, techguide.com.au, or mine, EFTM.com. I got an email this week from someone who was an EV owner, and we will start maybe next week or the week after. We might get a couple of...
volunteer to come on the show.
We'll get a couple of owners in the can, as they say, that we can use in the show.
Can I ask what they're driving?
I don't remember.
Keep it as a surprise?
No, I don't remember what the email was. So
Nice. Okay.
I'll look it up and let you know.
We'll get 'em
Surprise
on.
for our audience. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars.